Well, hello and welcome to Headlines. Now, as we've reported throughout the afternoon, the former Manchester City football star turned politician, Mikhail Kalashvili, has become Georgia's new president amid a climate of ongoing controversy and protests following elections in October. Well, the new president nominated by the Georgian Dream Party was the only candidate standing in today's vote, which was decided by a 300-seat electoral college, following constitutional changes introduced by the party 7 years ago. Well, joining us now to discuss this is the political expert, George Mechedlishvili. Welcome to A News, welcome to Headlines. Thank you very much for joining us from Tbilisi. I'd like to start by getting your analysis of what the new president needs to do now to secure support with his party, but also, more importantly perhaps, to win over the country.
Good evening. Thank you very much for the invitation. Well, the first question, actually, that's not a million-dollar question. That's an easy one because there's nothing much to analyze, unfortunately. Well, that president was clearly a political nominee. Well, this vote resembled, well, I was born still in Soviet Union, a Soviet style kind of like a nomination of the one and only candidate. It was unfortunately like a travesty. So again, as a person, well, people who know himself that he's a nice guy, but obviously that is not enough. This is a serious qualification gap. That's not enough to be a president. Well, you mentioned the reference to the Manchester City. Well, this is one of the best football clubs in the history of the game. But, well, it's not about presidency. It is about sport. So, and very unfortunately, well, he has been in politics for some time, and he made his name as, unfortunately, uncouth, rude, very unpolitical, very undiplomatic, well, which is pretty much the opposite of what the qualities the president should bear. So, therefore, so far, I don't see the way he can bridge the differences between the different political factions, something that even the current president, far more experienced and far more versed in political issues, could not manage. That task, even for her, was an uphill battle. Even she was no match to that supreme, I would say, monumental task of bridging very polarized political differences and opinions in Georgia. So if Solomon Zurabishvili could not manage it, what can we expect from the person with next to zero experience in these issues?
Well, as you say there, not much to analyse at this point yet. Why don't you just lay out for us what you see as those problems so far? What are the challenges that the new president has to get to grips with? And is there a way through this very polarised situation?
Well, since the president was elected by the Electoral College and the part of the Electoral College composed entirely of the Georgian Dream government and MPs and their representatives, he is so much beholden that he will not have any political latitude, any leeway of action, which is very unfortunate. So the Georgian Dream has had, complicated, I would say, experience with the presidents. They were nominating their candidacy. That candidate on 2 occasions won primarily on the crest of the support of the political party, which the party did enjoy at the time, be it 2013, 2018. It was far more popular than any other political rival, and therefore it was easy. Now, the political party, the ruling party, is in a very dire strait, in a very difficult situation. Politically and internationally. So therefore, in this particular moment, there should be the president which could inspire respect. I mean, political respect as a political figure, as a independent political actor, and should have international clout, which, well, I wouldn't say that he doesn't have intellectual clout. He has a negative one. So, and again, should be an experienced, I would say, like diplomat, that the person who is able to navigate very troubled waters of Georgian politics and regional politics. I think that the person is supremely unfit for that job.
And you mentioned the troubled waters, not just domestically, but also looking externally to the region and perhaps beyond. What are those challenges that he's going to have to get to grips with on day one when it comes to diplomacy with other countries, neighbouring countries in the region, but also partnerships that he might look to try and build further afield?
Formally it is a day one of his presidency, but it might be some time before he will be able to go to brass tacks and to start the actual one, because at the moment the country is in the grips of serious political crisis, domestic political crisis. It remains to be seen how the crisis is resolved. It seems that today both sides of the party admit that, I wouldn't even say opposition parties, but the significant section of the society which protests the recent decision of the government to put on hold these negotiations with the European Union. So this protest is major. It doesn't show the signs of subsiding. Okay, significant signs of subsiding, and both parties are really kind of like dug in and will not budge an inch. So therefore, I believe these crises should be resolved. I hope it will at some point, and again, I cannot predict the result. There are regional issues, so I very much believe that at some point, this peace agreement, because our neighbors, Armenia, Azerbaijan, will be signed, and South Caucasus might become a real, actual, genuine international region. So that situation requires a very experienced president, because we have obviously not even complicated formula. We do not have any relations with Russia, the country which occupies 2 provinces of Georgia. Also, we have now very complicated. There is some bad blood, has been some bad blood between Georgia and European institutions. I believe that certain responsibility is on both sides, and therefore this is a very complicated and multi-layered actually task, which requires a very careful, experienced hand, someone who could present a kind of meaningful and respectable independent actor. For me, it's hard to see how he will be able to navigate. So again, relations with the United States, major international partner of Georgia, are also on its nadir. So they also should be restored. And again, there could be further regional, maybe extended regional ties, be it with Azerbaijan and Turkey, which works for about 25 years, thanks to the previous leaderships, be it Shevardnadze or Saakashvili leadership. And thankfully, the incumbents, they built upon that progress and try to further improve it. So there is a war between Russia and Ukraine. So our relations even with Ukraine are on their nadir and experience very hard times. So Middle East is not very far afield. So we see that South Caucasus is in the midst of very, very, very troubled international region. So it requires care, it requires equanimity, it requires thinking, and it requires knowledge and experience.
2 of the great power blocks you mentioned there, the EU and the US, obviously very different strategies required for both of them. What do you expect in terms of some kind of positive overtures to the EU as a way of possibly bringing together, building bridges, both externally and in the country itself? And also, how do you expect the president to navigate his relationship with President Trump?
With regard to the European Union, it's interesting because Mikhail Amelashvili, so when he was politically active over the past few years, was noted for his, I would say, but notably anti-European stance. So, of all the people who were part of the defection, People's Power, he was probably the most vociferous in his critique of the West, the European Union in particular. So therefore, again, so far, I genuinely want to be mistaken. I really do. So I can see how he is able to build bridges again and to restore ties with the European Union, with the European institutions. Again, by saying Europe, I am not idealizing European bureaucracy. I believe that several mistaken, very unjudicious and unfair criticisms has been waved against Georgia over the past years, and again, but it doesn't warrant stopping negotiation and cutting the ties. So again, the ties should be restored, but again, very carefully and very wisely. With the United States, when it comes to the United States, again, so Trump is still a dark horse. He has nominated several people, but we cannot predict how his foreign policy will develop. Well, the Georgian Dream Party, during the electoral period, during the campaign, they openly sided with Donald Trump. They were very unhappy with the outgoing administration. They staked their political fortune on Donald Trump. Well, luckily for them, so far the Trump won. But again, so one thing is to stake on the candidate and on the leadership and on the administration, and quite a different task and far more complicated task is building the ties with them. There are certain elements of continuity in U.S. foreign policy, and therefore it is far for foregone conclusion that the Trump administration will start relations with Georgia as a tabula rasa, as a new page. Some complicated issues will need to be resolved. Maybe they could be resolved. We can see that, well, on certain issues, Trump administration and his personality and policy are different from the previous administration. There is a hope that relation will improve, but again, it remains to be seen. We cannot predict it at the moment.
And from where you are in Tbilisi, we've spoken about the politicians, but I'd like to end by getting your view about where the people are at the moment. Have you seen the mood of the people change, develop, the levels of discord, the protests, the polarised debates? Has that changed and developed in recent days? And what do you expect to happen in the days ahead?
Well, we see that, as I mentioned, both parties won't budge an inch, and we see that sometimes, and I would say particularly the government, the leadership, they would probably unintentionally they pour more oil onto the fire. So, for instance, the decision actually to introduce the Christmas tree, to open officially the Christmas tree on the very site of the parliament, of the protest near the parliament. Of course, it was risky and divisive. Certain factions of the protesters are also very aggressively disposed and try to be provocative, which of course doesn't warrant and doesn't justify the crackdowns, some of which are obviously have been obviously disproportionate. So therefore, we see that I believe that over the first week of the protest has been growing. Now it plateaued. I believe it's plateaued. I very much hope it will subside and some optimal decision, I don't know which one, but optimal decisions will be made in order to bring the situation back into this constitutional framework and political dialogue, with differences, sometimes vociferous differences, sometimes major differences, but still a dialogue and these compromises which are necessary to reach progress.
Mr. Mechedlashvili, thank you so much for bringing your analysis to us from Tbilisi.
Thank you for inviting me. Have a good day.
Thank you very much. Well, that is all we have time for on this edition of Headlines. Please do stay tuned to A News as we continue to follow this developing story from Georgia, and we wish you a very pleasant evening ahead.